I'm Amanda. I'm a volunteer here at the Queen's Botanical Garden, and today we'll be talking about how to care for orchids. What we have here today are two beautiful Phalaenopsis hybrid orchids. So the first thing we'll talk about is how to successfully care for your new orchid. And that success first begins with selecting a healthy orchid from your florist or garden center. You want to look for leaves that are a medium green, leaves that are firm and plump, and even signs of new growth like this new leaf that's coming out are indications of a healthy orchid. Next, you want to lift the orchid out of its decorative pot, and oftentimes it will be planted in some type of plastic liner like this one. And we can see here that these roots are nice and green, plump and healthy. If the medium is dry, you'll see silver roots like this. These are all signs of a healthy orchid. You'll also want to avoid orchids with any leaves that show wrinkling, with leaves that are pliable or soft. This could indicate signs of root loss or dehydration. So now that you've selected your healthy orchid and you've taken the orchid home, you'll want to place it in an area of your home with bright but indirect sunlight. That could be in an east or south-facing window. Your orchid will do best in temperatures that are suited to humans, so this would be in the range of 65 degrees on the low end to 90 degrees on the high end. After you've had your orchid for a while and you're ready for it to rebloom, if you leave your orchid next to an open window in the spring or fall, the cooler nighttime temperatures can often encourage your orchid to rebloom and put up a new flower spike. The frequency with which you water your orchid will depend on the medium that the orchid is potted in, as well as your home growing conditions and the level of humidity in your home. For example, if your orchid is potted in something like a sphagnum moss, this is going to take much longer time to dry out than if it were, say, potted in fir bark. Ideally, you need to let your orchid completely dry out before you water again. When watering your orchid, you can either run the pot carefully under your faucet, or you can use a watering can to precisely direct the water into the root area. You always want to avoid getting any water into this crown area or on the leaves. When water sits here in the crown, it can create rot problems. Ideally, if your orchid is potted in an airy mix that allows good airflow and good drainage, such as a fir bark mixture, you would ideally water every 5 to 7 days. You should always check the moisture level in your potting medium before watering again. Make sure to always let your pot medium dry out in between waterings. In between waterings, to give your orchid a little extra humidity, you can simply mist the top of the medium, like so. This will provide extra humidity and encourage new root growth around your orchid. Once the orchid is finished flowering, will it bloom again? Well, your orchid can potentially bloom from the same flower spike, or if you cut the flower spike all the way down, within a year it should produce a brand new flower spike. Fertilizers will provide nutrients for strong plant growth. What we have here are a few different types of fertilizers. We have an all-purpose balanced fertilizer here, and we have another that encourages bloom growth in the spring and fall. You can find these at any garden supply, and they come from a variety of brands. Simply follow the instructions on your label to mix your fertilizer and administer the fertilizer once a week or once every 2 weeks. Today we'll be repotting this Phalaenopsis orchid. Ideally, you want to wait until your orchid is finished blooming and you start to see signs of new root growth. But for the sake of this demonstration, we will pot this orchid that is in bloom. When you repot your new orchid, Our goal is to provide an environment with good aeration and good drainage. We want to avoid a situation where roots are sitting in a lot of water, which could encourage root rot. A preferred potting medium is one like this here. This Better Grow mix is available at any garden supply, and it's pre-mixed with fir bark, sponge rock, and charcoal. You can purchase additional individual media, such as this clay pellets here, sponge rock, coconut husk, which provides a little bit more moisture than fir bark would, and also we have some sphagnum moss here. You can use this within the bark mixture and also on top to provide a little bit more humidity around your orchid. Some tools that you will need while repotting your orchid include cutting shears like this. And before repotting your orchid, you'll want to be sure to sterilize with alcohol to avoid transferring any pathogens from plant to plant. You may also need a stake like this for stabilizing your plant with clips. Orchid pots come in a variety of shapes and sizes. We have one here that's a clay. It has a drainage hole at the bottom, which is key. We also have some different plastic pots here. I prefer ones with slits on the sides like so that you can get good airflow into your pot. We also have a net basket here. These provide additional airflow for orchids that are potted primarily in a sphagnum moss. What we have here is some pre-soaking bark. By soaking the bark overnight or for several hours, you'll allow the bark to take up more moisture and ready it for being potted. I've watered and soaked this orchid in advance so as to make the roots pliable and reduce any breakage during the repotting. You don't want to grab it by its leaves, but down here at the base of the stem. It's really packed in there. So what you can see here is that this orchid is potted primarily in the sphagnum moss. So what we're going to do is remove all of this from the roots. So now that we've removed all of the sphagnum moss, this is what we're left with. I'm going to give the roots just a quick rinse to remove any remaining debris. And now we're going to inspect the roots for anything that's dead, brown, mushy, or showing signs of rot. Healthy roots are green, firm to the touch, so we'll begin removing any dead roots or roots that are brown and mushy. For instance, right here, if you squeeze this, it easily gives way. So we'll be clipping this off, as well as anything where the root itself is exposed. This will never produce any more roots, so we'll just clip that right off. Here is what we're left with after trimming off all of the dead material. You can see that we have many green, plump, firm roots, and also the ones that are slightly yellow here are also firm. They're yellow simply because they were not exposed to sunlight. So the next thing we'll do is select our pot. So we've selected this pot here with slots on the side and drainage holes on the bottom. This pot allows the roots to fit snugly, however, it's a little bit tall for my liking. If the pot is a little bit too big and we pack it with too much medium, it could lead to less airflow and less drainage. So what I'm going to do is place some of these broken terracotta pieces in the bottom. This will help provide good drainage. You can also use rocks, packing peanuts, or anything that's going to allow good drainage and airflow. So we'll start by adding in the medium that I've mixed up here. So what we have is the Better Grow fir bark mix that we have been soaking. I've added in a little bit of finely chopped sphagnum moss just to give a little bit more moisture, as well as the clay pellets. The clay pellets will not take up much moisture and it will allow good drainage of water. So we'll start by adding a little bit of bark to the bottom of our pot. And then what we'll do is we'll take our orchid, and I like to shape the roots so that they form somewhat of a little bowl. And what I'll do is I'll just pack gently some of the medium into this little root container that we've created, just loosely. And then we'll flip this over into its pot, like so. You want to make sure that the stem of the plant is above the medium and right at the line of the pot here. So I'm going to begin gently packing in our potting medium all around into the spaces in between the roots and down into the sides as well. And here's the finished product. As you can see, the crown and the stem are above the potting media, and everything is firmly packed down in the sides and in between the roots. Another benefit of these plastic pots is that you can clearly see your roots growing and you can identify any potential problems. So lastly, we'll give our pot a quick water, carefully avoiding the leaves and the crown area. And then I'm going to top our brand new repotted Phalaenopsis orchid with some sphagnum moss for the top. And we won't pack this down too firmly. It's just to add a little additional moisture and humidity around the plant. So we've just loosely added the sphagnum moss to the top, and this mixture will give you good airflow through the pot and good drainage of your water. With this, you won't need to repot again for another 1 to 2 years.